this part of the world though is so it's so mired with conflict, and it has been for such a long period of time, and it's been subject of so many like different interventions from the West and from Russia at certain times, and like through the Cold War you go back, and I'll not lecture you. You know more than me about this. So my question is
That's
essentially,
okay.
yeah, my question is essentially how or what is it about this region of the world do you think that means that yeah, America is sort of leading the charge, but like backed up by many Western powers. What is it that we're doing there? Because I have my suspicions. It could be about oil or terrorism, or it could be about you know opioids and heroin in the poppy fields in Afghanistan. It could be about lithium ion. But like from someone who spent so long writing about war in this part of the world, like why is it such a conflict ravaged society, and what draws us into that area in your opinion?
Yeah. Well, I mean, all of their problems that they have in the first place is kind of beyond my purview. But as far as what we're doing there and what's the big deal, I mean, as you already have, quite aptly demonstrated, it's a conspiracy of interests. It's oil, of course, it's arms contractors, it's the Zionist movement in America and in Israel and around the world, and a huge influence that the Israel lobby has over American and British politics, for a couple of examples. Um, I think the heroin black market, had a lot to do with keeping us in Afghanistan, all that liquid cash in the hands of connected gangsters. And every bank is only just one drawer away from total black market, global heroin trade, type dollars. It's tens of billions a year at least in liquid money there, black market money. So that's a huge part of it. It must be. But arms sales and just shiny ribbons for generals' uniforms that then, of course, also amount, and most importantly, besides the so-called valor that they get, is the more ribbons on your shirt, the better of a job you get on the board of directors at a defense firm when you retire. And so, and then, of course, the Middle Eastern states are weak. So as Paul Wolfowitz said, Iraq is doable, right? Iraq had no more to do with September 11th than France did, but France has H bombs. We can't go to war with them, right? But Iraq, we can, I paraphrase Moff Tarkin in the book that, quite frankly, and if you remember back, I don't know how old you're, but if you're old enough and remember back, Afghanistan was too remote to make an effective demonstration. And so they went to Iraq where people would be paying attention. I mean, in Afghanistan, the place was run by the Taliban. It's the town of Bedrock. There's nothing to bomb there. And, Rumsfeld complained immediately, we're out of targets. They had a couple of concentrated army divisions. We obliterated them with a handful of JDAMs. Now, what are we going to do? Just sit around bombing rocks and empty hillsides and this thing? We want to go and do some damage, and we want to set an example for the world that if you mess with us, in fact, if somebody you've ever met once messes with us, we might kill you. And that's how ruthless we are. And so nobody ever better mess with us again, and what have you. In the case of Iraq War II, to go down the list of the principles, the president saw his father get unelected after 4 years. Why? In the thinking of W. Bush and a hell of a lot of people like him, and there must be some truth to this, right? Because he ended the war too early. Geez, Dad, you got a 90% approval rating, but the election's not for a year and a half. That's plenty of time for Ross Perot to split the vote and Bill Clinton to come from behind and take the presidency away from you. They wouldn't dare change horses in midstream if you were in the middle of occupying Baghdad and changing the regime. And so no matter how many Iraqis have to die for that, it would have been worth it, Dad, if you just done that so you could stay the president. So then when he got that was W's advice in the first place. Then he was right. His father got unelected. See, told you so. And then he spent 8 years thinking how smart he was. And I have the block quote in the book. He tells Mickey Herskowitz, his authorized biographer before he switched, and the guy who his family kept on, they had him write the biography of Prescott Bush next. And he quotes W. Bush saying, if I have a chance to go to war with Iraq, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to be a successful president because it's a war president. In history, it's the war presidents who are the great presidents. And then I'll be able to get my entire agenda through and blah, blah, blah. He just says it plain as day, as simple as that. And, they tried to deny it, but there's no reason in the world to think that this guy who is a legitimate journalist and who claims that he has it on tape, he had no reason in the world to lie. And then again, W. Bush's father hired this guy to then write the biography of Prescott Bush after that. So apparently they didn't think that he had lied about that quote at all. And I think there's also the whole thing about W. Bush knows that he's a stupid freaking idiot, right? And that his father always kind of resented him for being a letdown and a loser. It's in the Oliver Stone clip. It's probably not an exact quote, but it's very close. And it certainly summarized the trip, the reality of the situation when the father says to W. Bush, you're a real disappointment for me, Junior, and he's like, where? So this is the whole thing. I'm going to prove I'm tougher and smarter and better than my father and all this kind of thing. Everybody always said that it was to avenge his father because Saddam Hussein tried to kill him. Well, first of all, do you really believe that? Give me a break. That lie was so debunked by Seymour Hersh in the New Yorker 30 years ago. What a bunch of crap. Oh, yeah, Saddam was going to truck bomb George Bush to death. Shut up. Anyway, the Kuwaitis made that up. And the CIA and FBI knew they were lying, and then they decided to lie too. That's all. But then also, Bush wasn't animated by that. That wasn't it. It was trying to show up his old dad. But then you got Dick Cheney. Now, Dick Cheney, I think, first of all, probably is a Zionist by ideology anyway. But more importantly, he's a really lousy CEO. And what happened was Halliburton, which was also the owner of the subsidiary Kellogg Brown and Root, they're not an oil company. They're an oil services company, right? They build pipelines. They do big construction. They're like the Bin Laden family of Texas. They do huge, government contract construction. And so they thought that by hiring Dick Cheney, they would just be hitching onto the gravy train. The problem was Dick Cheney was a politician. He didn't know anything about business. And so what he did, him and his right-hand man, the CFO, whose name I always forget, but it's in the book, they bought a firm called Dresser Industries. I swear, like a week and a half, 2 weeks before literally billions, not hundreds of millions, literally billions of asbestos cancer claim lawsuits started coming due against Dresser. Dick Cheney bought them like a week and a half before the dam broke and the storm started. So this was just absolutely the most idiotic and negligent self-inflicted wound to Halliburton. So he owed them big time. And so the solution was, I'm going to put them on the dole building bases for the Army and doing contracts for the Army. And, this company, they got their big start working with LBJ in the first place. It's a very political company. They made huge contracts in Vietnam. And, they've been a very political corporation all along. And here, I wouldn't be surprised if Dick Cheney was personally terrified of them and what was going to happen to him if he didn't fix what he had broken there. And then you have Donald Rumsfeld, who had been the Secretary of Defense before. And now it's the post-Cold War era. And there's this huge fight on about transformation of the military and how are we going to transform it? Well, Rumsfeld had his own ideas. He wants to go cut back on the Army, build up special operations forces, and build up on the Air Force. We'll go in light and fast to smash the hell out of them like Iraq War I, and then we'll get right back out again. That would be the model. And so he would do the transformation, and Iraq would be the showcase for how we're supposed to do this. And then you got the neocons, and that's Paul Wolfowitz. And well, let's start at the Pentagon so I can keep them straight. On the Defense Policy Board, led by Richard Pearl and Kenneth Edelman and Gene Kirkpatrick on the Defense Policy Board. Then you had Paul Wolfowitz was the Deputy Secretary of Defense, and Douglas Feith was the Deputy Secretary of Defense for Policy. And under him was Abram Shulsky, who ran the Office of Special Plans, which included Michael Rubin and Michael Ledeen and another handful of these neocon apparatchiks. I forgot if Moravchik was one of them. Then across the hall from the Office of Special Plans, you had the Policy Counterterrorism Evaluation Group, which was run by, it was under Feith, but it was Michael Maloof and David Wormser. And then David Wormser left. Oh, and then there was, it's on the tip of my tongue, this guy at the Pentagon, the Office of Net Assessment was, God dang it, Bobby. I'm so sorry. It's right on the tip of Anyways, so then Wormser goes to state, and Wormser's with Bolton. Now, Bolton's not truly a neocon. To be a neocon, used to be a leftist, and then you became a right winger. That's what it means, neoconservative. It's not just neoconservative. It doesn't mean conservative nowadays. It means this particular sect of kooks who used to be commies and then became Reaganites. It's them and their sons and their sons. I can elaborate on that in a little while. It's a specific biographical definition. But so Bolton, for example, is not a neocon because he's a lifelong Barry Goldwater right-wing nationalist conservative, right? He loves neocons and they love him, and they're, kissing cousins, but they're not the same thing. But he's right there with Wormser, and their job is to keep a leash on Colin Powell and his right-hand man, Dick Armitage, and prevent them from getting in the way of them doing too much damage, which is what they were trying to do, right? And Powell was trying to stop them half-heartedly, at least. And so their job was, they worked directly for Cheney as, the control over Colin Powell at state. Then on the National Security Council, you had Stephen Hadley and Robert Joseph and, Elliot Abrams and now I'm trying to think. I'm leaving one off of that NSC. Elliot Abrams was there, I know for sure. And then in the vice president's office, very importantly, you had Scooter Libby, who was also special assistant to the president, and John Hanna and Harold Rode, and I'm forgetting one more too. I'm getting weak in my old age here. And these guys, listen, you can tell. I'm sorry, but you know where I'm going with this. These guys are agents of the state of Israel. They work for Benjamin Netanyahu, and their job was lying the American people into war. And, Colin Powell's right-hand man, Lawrence Wilkerson, said that out of all of these guys, Wormser and Feith were literal agents of influence for Israel. And so he was, he was discriminating there between these guys who are de facto Likud, but between these guys are really working for Netanyahu. And it's a good point, too, that they weren't so much working for Sharon. They were working for Netanyahu. Now, Sharon was prime minister at the time, and he went along with this. But he urged Bush to attack Iran first. And then when Bush said, no, we're doing Iraq first, and all the American neocons said we're doing Iraq first, Sharon said, okay, fine. But that was because the American neocons were much closer with Netanyahu than they were with Sharon, who ended up, by the way, if you remember, breaking away from Likud and creating his own party, Kadima, later, which was taking a step left from Netanyahu's Likud nationalism. But anyway, so Likud, so Netanyahu's faction of Likud and the neocons in America, they wanted rid of Saddam Hussein. And you can read this, and it's a lot of fun in a way. It's a ridiculous, no offense to any Iraqis listening, how fun it is, but you read A Clean Break, a new strategy for securing the realm. And its primary author is Wormser, David Wormser. And it's co-signed by Richard Pearl, who absolutely co-signed every little bit of it, and Douglas Feith, who later denied that he agreed with it. And then Charles Fairbanks and a couple of others. But those are the big three, clearly in the first term of the W. Bush administration, who wanted us to go to Iraq no matter what. Now, what I'm about to say doesn't make sense, but it's not because I'm confused. It's just confusing because these guys are a bunch of kooks who believe a bunch of stupid lies and then repeat them to us. So this is how it washes out, okay? Now, we're going back to the 90s. Saddam's still in power. We got this kind of stalemate. America's bombing the no-fly zones. They've tried to do a coup and a revolution in first a revolution and then a coup in 95 and 96. Neither of those worked. They're still doing the no-fly zone bombing. And Wormser comes out and he says, we have to finish this job. Now, he's actually not saying we should invade the country, but he's saying we have to finish the job of overthrowing Saddam Hussein. In fact, I should mention for your people who are really interested in this, the companion piece is called Coping with Crumbling States. And then there's a book called Tyranny's Ally, which is with a foreword by Richard Pearl. It's just a clean break, full length book version. Same damn thing. And Coping with Crumbling States is the same thing too. They say the same thing over and over again. And it basically goes like this. Israel's problem is Shiite Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Okay. And what we want to do is we want to break the chain of power from Shiite Iran through Syria to Hezbollah. And the way to do that is by getting rid of Saddam Hussein in Iraq. Now you're thinking, see, I can see it on your face. You're going, yeah, but didn't Ronald Reagan and George Bush's father back Saddam Hussein in war against Iran for 8 years to contain the Iranian Revolution? And isn't that the same reason that Bush Sr., after he encouraged the Shiites to rise up after Iraq War I, that then he changed his mind and stabbed them in the back and let Saddam Hussein mass murder 100,000 of them rather than let them win their revolution? Because he was afraid that the Iranians were going to come in and dominate the Shiite factions and take over the power of the country. So now you tell me why getting rid of Saddam Hussein is supposed to weaken Iran's influence in the region when it seems like he's the only thing holding their influence back. Well, here's the answer. The answer is David Worms are stupid, and Richard Pearl too. And what they believed was that if we got rid of Saddam Hussein, then rather than Iran have an influence in Baghdad, the king of Jordan will inherit all the power in Baghdad. And because the Hashemite family declares that they are descended from the Prophet Muhammad, then that means the Iraqi Shiite supermajority will bend over and do whatever they're told because they are like, I don't know, slaves to anyone who claims to have the blood of Muhammad in their veins. And then that way, get this, now the new Sunni Hashemite kingdom in Iraq will order the Shiite clergy in Najaf to tell Hezbollah to stop being friends with Iran and to instead be friends with Israel and Jordan and Turkey and America's axis of power in the region. Now, see, this is completely crazy.
Yeah,
it's completely crazy.
Can I stop you here for just a second?
Yes, please.
Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment for us in the comments below. Let me know what you thought and if you'd like to see more of this from the show. Thank you, and we'll see you again next time.